Hello and welcome to the Data Engineering Podcast, the show about modern data management. Have you ever woken up to a crisis because a number on a dashboard is broken and no one knows why, or sent out frustrating Slack messages trying to find the right dataset, or tried to understand what a column name means? Our friends at Atlan started out as a data team themselves and faced all this collaboration chaos. They started building Atlan as an internal tool for themselves. Atlan is a collaborative workspace for data-driven teams, like GitHub for engineering or Figma for design teams. By acting as a virtual hub for data assets ranging from tables and dashboards to SQL snippets and code, Atlan enables teams to create a single source of truth for all of their data assets, and collaborate across the modern data stack through deep integrations with tools like Snowflake, Slack, Looker, and more. Go to dataengineeringpodcast.com/Atlan today, that's ATLAN, and sign up for a free trial. If you're a Data Engineering Podcast listener, you get credits worth $3,000 on an annual subscription. When you're ready to build your next pipeline and want to test out the projects you hear about on the show, you'll need somewhere to deploy it, so check out our friends over at Linode. With their managed Kubernetes platform, it's now even easier to deploy and scale your workflows, or try out the latest Helm charts from tools like Pulsar, Pachyderm, and Dagster. With simple pricing, fast networking, object storage, and worldwide data centers, you've got everything you need to run a bulletproof data platform. Go to dataengineeringpodcast.com/Linode today, that's LINODE, and get a $100 credit to try out a Kubernetes cluster of your own. And don't forget to thank them for their continued support of this show. Your host is Tobias Macey, and today I'm interviewing Satish Jayanthi about how organizations can use data architectural patterns to stay competitive in today's data-rich environment. So Satish, can you start by introducing yourself?
Thank you for having me on this. My name is Satish Jayanthi. I'm one of the co-founders of Coalesce, and I currently play the Chief Technology Officer role in the company.
And do you remember how you first got started working in the area of data?
Yes, absolutely. I have started my career as an application programmer, dabbled with that, and soon became a DBA, database administrator, by accident. I was responsible to run the database servers on a regular basis to make sure the business is running smoothly. This is for an online e-learning platform startup in Los Angeles. And because it's a startup, I was kind of playing many roles, as you can expect in a startup. And one of the things that I was doing was I was writing and providing insights, like writing queries and generating reports for the business as part of my DBA role as well. And it got to a point where it was just not sustainable. The amount of requests that I was getting and the amount of work that I had to do to put something together and give it to business. These were like some basic questions like, hey, how many people are, using this particular course, or what are the top 10 courses, things like that. And I questioned myself, like, there must be a better way to do this. And that's when I had my first encounter with the concept of data warehousing. So I picked up Ralph Kimball's data warehouse toolkit, read it many times, was very interesting, and then implemented my first data mart. Then that was like a big light bulb for me at that time. And that's how I got into that and continued to build a lot of data warehouses, data marts, and eventually also managed some groups of data professionals and so on for several companies.
And so that brings us now to where you are today at Coalesce. I'm wondering if you can share a bit about what it is that you're building there and some of the story behind how it came to be and why this is the problem space that you wanted to spend your time and energy on.
Yeah, absolutely. So in my several years of data warehousing and data mart and data analytics experience, the main challenge, it was always data transformations for me. It was pretty clear that we were spending a lot of time to take the raw data and change it to a form that is useful and that can be consumed for decision making. So when I was leading a group in a financial firm, we were building data warehouses. We had all the tools because we were acquiring companies. So it was growing really fast. And we had a big ETL team and pretty much any tool that you can think of. But we were still unable to keep up with the demand. And then at that time, I came across this concept from a company, especially. It's called Warescape. That was my first encounter of data warehouse automation. The whole idea is there's so many patterns in data warehousing and so many mundane tasks. How can you automate those things in a way that you make the engineers very productive? And it's just not one thing, but it's those, opportunities wherever you can automate from, one end to the other, the entire data warehouse lifecycle. And the aggregation of those automations collectively will make you more productive. So that was the concept. And I was hooked onto that. And, I implemented it and saw really like a lot of benefit from that. When that company got acquired and I moved on, and that concept was what stuck in my mind. And that was a legacy product. So we took that concept and built it for the modern data stack. That's how we got here. And my co-founder and I, we worked for that company, implementing large data warehouses for large companies with great results. There are a lot of drawbacks in that solution, and we saw that, and we found an opportunity to modernize and build it for the modern stack. But the core idea was still automation and automating data transformation, which we think is still not automated. There's a lot of other areas like the database platforms now. Snowflake has automated that. Data acquisition, like if you look at Fivetran, it's doing a great job there. However, when it comes to data transformation, it's still ripe for automation, I would say.
And the most direct comparison that comes to mind right now is obviously the work that the folks at DBT are doing. And I'm curious if you can speak to some of the overlap and maybe potential coexistence of what you're building at Coalesce as compared to where the focus of DBT is.
So what we have seen in the last few years, if you go back several years, you'll see that people were at the beginning, they were just hand coding. And that was a lot of work. And then they said, okay, let's do something graphical. Then the ETL tools were born. The ETL tools are graphical tools that, graphic GUI-based tools. They would give you a lot of efficiency. And pretty much with some training could use them. So it's all like widget-based drag and drop data pipeline development. However, the problem was, when you go out of its boundaries and you have this special use case, then you had to resort to leaving the tool, go out and kind of do something like a stored procedure or something in the database itself. So that was a limitation. They were pretty inflexible. So what happened is, the whole industry kind of, took a 180-degree turn and went everything as code. And that's what DBT is. Everything is code. Now, it gives you a lot of flexibility. Of course, code is the most flexible thing. You can write anything you want. However, the cost of that is you lose the efficiency, is how we see it. Now, with everything as code paradigm, you need highly skilled people in the organization, especially large organizations. It's going to be hard to have that many highly skilled data engineers, given that it's so hard to find data engineers these days. And on top of that, because you don't have efficiency, you're going to be coding a lot and still not able to accomplish and keep up the demands. So what we think is a solution that has best of the both worlds is what is needed. And that's what we are. We are the solution that, you can do 80% of the work GUI, because it does give you a lot of productivity. There's a lot of patterns that can be automated. There's no reason why I should be coding the same thing over and over. And when it comes to corner cases, that's when I'll focus on the coding aspects of it. So that's how you get the results that you need on time.
To your point about the first generation of ETL tools and the drag and drop workflow builders, is that when you do hit the edges, you're kind of left to your own devices and you have to figure out, how do I build some additional component that I can somehow jam into this GUI builder and get them to work together. And I'm curious if you can talk to some of the escape hatches that you've built into Coalesce for being able to move from that initial process of, here's the rough workflow, this is 80% of what I need, but now I actually need to dig in and customize this to fit my specific use case, and being able to have that be an affordance in the system rather than something that you have to fight against the system to achieve?
One of the things, again, we wanted to build it in a way that we can provide 80% of the solution out of the box and easy to use by anybody. What that means is we kind of guide, the user in a certain direction in building a pipeline. There's a certain flow to it. Basically, we call it the graph. Everybody calls it a graph, whatever you're building as a pipeline. Each one is a node. And these nodes have certain configurations and certain behavior, right? How to create or how to materialize a particular object on Snowflake, or how do you load that object? If it's a table, how do you load what's the logic to load DML, basically? What we have done is we have built these components as Lego blocks, just at a very granular level. So you can assemble these things on your own to build a different kind of node type that fits a certain pattern. And as an architect, you can build these user-defined nodes and kind of, meet that or address those edge cases. So when people start off, they start off with a whole bunch of nodes that are available. For example, type 2 dimensions. Out of the box, you don't have to think about it. You just go use it. But if you say, I don't want this to behave this way, I want to do some changes, like maybe I don't want to use target key, I want to use hash keys. Then you go behind the scenes, you go into that node type, you make some minor adjustments, you have a new node type. Everything is like a Lego block that you can control and configure and work with it. So that's the idea here.
One of the challenges with warehouses has often been SQL and the fact that it is very declarative and flexible, but not always very composable. And I'm curious how you have approached that challenge of being able to encapsulate these nodes so that the handoff between them is as pluggable as you want it to be, so that you can combine them into these workflows without having to worry about how the underlying SQL is actually going to mesh together and what the sort of contract is between these different stages of the workflows.
The way that it works right now is there are several, you can build as many stages as you want in the pipeline, and you can have a raw layer, which is basically the raw data that's coming in. And then you can build a CDC layer, for example, to capture the deltas of what is being, loaded by a data ingestion system. You can have a staging layer, which is basically now we can materialize them as views or tables, but it's all happening in Snowflake. The data is moving from one layer to the other in Snowflake. So whether it's views or a set of tables, but today it's all SQL. Now you can change that because we are giving you templates. There is no reason why you can't generate a different type of code other than SQL in the tool. You have full control to overwrite the template and generate, for example, some other language, as long as Snowflake has the native capabilities to do so. And we're seeing more and more of that Snowflake is supporting all these other paradigms in the platform. So the handshake or the flow can be pretty much customizable in the way that you want. Today, we have only SQL support, so it has to go through table to view or, however, SQL functions. But I can see that handshake could change down the road, depending on what Snowflake provides.
Are you looking for a structured and battle-tested approach for learning data engineering? Would you like to know how you can build proper data infrastructures that are built to last? Would you like to have a seasoned industry expert guide you and answer all of your questions? Join Pipeline Academy, the world's first data engineering bootcamp. Learn in small groups with like-minded professionals for 9 weeks part-time to level up in your career. The course covers the most relevant and essential data and software engineering topics that enable you to start your journey as a professional data engineer or analytics engineer. Plus, they have Ask Me Anythings with world-class guest speakers every week. The next cohort starts in April of 2022. Visit dataengineeringpodcast.com/academy today and apply now. In terms of the overall workflow, looking at the site and through the documentation, it seems to be fairly opinionated, and I'm curious if you can talk to the design principles and philosophies that you have embedded into the user experience and how you make decisions about where to prioritize features and how to present the different capabilities of the system in a manner that's internally cohesive.
Again, it goes back to our philosophy of, hey, 80% of this can be automated. And the design principle is you got to be very easy to use. That's number one, since we are bringing best of the both worlds here. We are saying, hey, you have to have the flexibility, but at the same time, you have to have the efficiency. In order for it to be efficient, you need to kind of interact with the tool pretty easily. And also the personas that are going to be working with this tool, it also varies depending on their experience, right? If I'm an architect, my experience should be that I should be able to go and set standards so that junior engineers can just consume those standards without even thinking about them. If there's, extensibility that needs to happen, I can do that as well. I can extend the product behavior because there is a new feature or new, something that came out in Snowflake that we want to support. Now you go create a new node and then you make that available that can be consumed by data engineers. Now, as a data engineer, the experiences could be different. If you're a junior engineer, you may just want to go build pipelines based on the standards set by my architect. So we want to make sure that that is possible and that they're getting the productivity that they're expecting out of this tool. But on the other hand, if you're a data analyst, like a business analyst, building dashboards, reports, for them, it's all about understanding what was built and why it was built the way it was built. Like, what does this dimension mean? What does this column mean? How do I understand, or how do I know that this data is correct and where is it coming from? So for them, the experience is all about documentation, lineage, understanding what was built. Because there is no data project where you can just kind of remove these data professionals or personas from. At the end of the day, in the real world, all of these people have to come together to make a data project successful. So we are making sure that these people have the right experience for what they're doing in the tool.
And so in terms of the actual Coalesce platform, I'm wondering if you can speak to the technical architecture and how you've approached the implementation of the system.
Yeah, so this is, again, we have implemented on the cloud. We are on Google Cloud. We have a Kubernetes cluster that would serve as an application to our clients. It's a multi-tenant environment. And we have a metadata database that is in Google Firebase. So, we get all that scalability from the Google's system. And as far as scalability of processing goes, the data processing, of course, we rely on Snowflake. We have a template renderer that takes all the metadata as input and generates the code according to whatever template logic that was written. And those are submitted to Snowflake, and Snowflake is doing the heavy lifting and returns the result sets, whatever it has done, and how many rows affected, or is there an error. Those things get back to the system from Snowflake. Yeah, so essentially it is a cloud-based system where we have a cluster that is working as a multi-tenant platform.
In terms of the data architectural patterns, you mentioned that Coalesce is designed to enable a junior or intermediate level data engineer to be productive while staying within the guardrails that are set by a more senior engineer or a data architect. And I'm curious if you can talk to some of the patterns that you have seen organizations fall prey to where they end up spending wasted cycles, or they start to design themselves into a situation where they're gradually losing productivity rather than gaining it.
We have seen some amazing things that are happening with this whole user-defined node concept that we have provided to our customers. But at the same time, people can make mistakes with that. So far, I would say it's been more positive than negative. I can talk about just some pitfalls if that's what you're looking for, that people can, do and get into trouble. I myself had those kind of pitfalls in the past. Sometimes under pressure, I would take some Band-Aid approach and do something that is, it doesn't address the foundational aspect of the data analytics solution, but it's just like a Band-Aid. And then you end up with that Band-Aid forever. You think you can get rid of it, but you don't. That's a pitfall. And also, when you plan these data projects, and if you quickly create a Band-Aid and you give it to the business, the business might think that is the solution. You already built the solution, so you're done, and I got what I want. So it's over, right? But in your mind, you're thinking, hey, that was just a Band-Aid. I still haven't built it the right way. I need more budget. I need more people. That there is a part 2 for this project. So that is another pitfall that I myself encountered in the past, where it's nothing to do with the technology itself. It's just more about how you approach this whole thing. If I'm building a foundation, you got to say, part 1, part 2, part 3, or phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Phase 1 is probably a quick and dirty solution. Phase 2 is the improvement on that. Phase 3 is the real output. And you got to plan for that 3 years or whatever number of years and get the budget for the whole thing, not just for one thing. So that's the lesson that I learned myself when I was doing it. So again, I know you're looking for a more technical side of these things, but I think sometimes it's the non-technical is more important than the technical, I would say. As far as the technical aspects of this, it's pretty straightforward in a way, because you know what Snowflake does. If you have somebody who has built data warehouses, we are providing you a platform that can automate those patterns. So if you do that, you're going to be pretty good, pretty satisfied with it.
In terms of those pre-built templates, you mentioned that it comes out of the box with a certain set of them. End users are able to add and customize their own templates. I'm curious what your approach has been to figuring out what is the minimum base set of templates that you want to provide, the specific data modeling styles that you want to work with, maybe providing templates to be able to work with specific data sources and use cases, and how you think about what you wanted to have available at start, whether it was like the Snowflake approach to data modeling in terms of the star schemas and slowly changing dimensions, or Data Vault, and just how you think about that overall process of providing data modeling out of the box to get people started moving faster and helping them to discover what are the actual problems that they care about as a business that are the rest of the 20%.
So what we're seeing is, as far as the data warehousing solutions go, people have certain methodologies that they want to adopt, right? I mean, Kimball has been the standard one for a long time. There is a lot of momentum around Data Vault, and there is everything in between, right? I mean, variations of Data Vault, variations of other methodologies. So what we are doing is we're giving a set of out-of-the-box, again, these nodes, for dimensions, for facts, for persistent staging, stage nodes, hubs, links, satellites, you name it. So we provide those things out of the box. For the most part, that would satisfy a lot of use cases right out of the box. In anything that is beyond that, they can change it. They can branch off of an existing one and they can enhance it to meet their needs. But what we are seeing also is like people coming up with stuff that we didn't expect. For example, Snowflake has this streaming and tasks as a functionality. It just identify deltas and things like that. One of our customers, they just went ahead and built a CDC node. And now that node is available in the graph, and you can just take a bunch of raw tables and say, add a stream, add a task, and run every 10 minutes or whatever, and dump the delta into another table. It has become such an easy task for everybody else to consume that type of functionality and build that type of functionality into their pipelines. That's what we're seeing, And we also see that the nodes that we're giving out of the box, that is going to grow, because we want to create a marketplace where people can actually share these things, nodes or packages, like a bunch of nodes together that perform a certain function. So that's where we're going with that.
And as far as the workflow for adopting Coalesce and starting to integrate it into the usage and the data platform and the sort of organizational analytics capabilities, I'm wondering if you can just talk through that process and some of the background knowledge that's useful to have as you're figuring out what the overall workflow and the node structures are going to look like.
Again, there's several personas that are going to be using the tool. It's not just built for one type, because we want to address the entire problem for as much as we can, not just one piece. Although we're focused on transformations, there is these other things that are on the edge that also are important. So transformations is like, how do I change the data from one form to another as quickly as possible? But what if I don't have column lineage, right? Then you don't have a way to really kind of see, what's going on. So to answer your question, it depends on the organizational structure. If they have data engineers, that would be ideal kind of persona to deal with the tool because they understand SQL, they understand the methodology to some degree. And, if you have architects, for them, they're going to work with the customization aspect of the tool. So I think that's what is expected. To work with the tool, we're saying you have to be either an architect or a data engineer or a power user who would get some help from IT, but they also can build the pipelines, whether they are proficient in SQL or not.
And as I was looking at the Coalesce product, I noticed that it's very closely tied to Snowflake as the underlying storage and warehouse layer. And I'm curious if you can speak to the thinking that went into that decision and some of the ways that you have implemented Coalesce to potentially allow for additional storage and query engines in the future and some of the other directions that you see as potential expansions to Coalesce.
When we started this, Snowflake was an obvious choice. Every other prospect that we talked to is moving to Snowflake pretty much. It was pretty clear for us to focus on Snowflake. However, the tool is built in a way that the communication with the query engine has been abstracted. It's just a best practice, right? I mean, to build a software in a way that the front end is agnostic to what it's talking to. So that's how the tool is built. The middle layer is the template. And we are not thinking about this at this time because we are hyper-focused on Snowflake. And we want to expand the platform even more and be in lockstep with Snowflake's features and things like that. But however, because we built it in a way that that part is abstracted, if we really want to support another platform, all it is that we have to do is build those templates that would generate the flavor of the SQL that can run on a particular target platform.
In terms of the ways that you have been working with some of your early design partners, I'm wondering what are some of the most interesting or innovative or unexpected ways that they're using Coalesce?
One of the things I was surprised is people are building these nodes that I was talking about that we never thought of. And, one example I gave you, which is, streaming and tasks, CDC type of functionality. But there's also people building like a data profiling functionality into this. So people can create a profiling node and capture the profiling metrics to monitor data quality. And that is something that we haven't, built or given to anybody. But because the platform enables them to do that, so they have rapidly building these nodes that we never thought of. And the other aspect, it's pretty interesting from my standpoint, is how quickly people are able to build, complex solutions. I'll tell you a recent thing that happened. So we have an alliance director who was, responsible to work with large firms and their, system integrators and partners. He's been handing out trial accounts and things like that. And there was this SI, a big firm, they got some trial accounts. And, we got on a call after they got the trial accounts. 2 days later, we were on a call. And before the call started, they were saying that, hey, they want to talk to another firm to talk and show them this tool. And we were like, we just sent you a recording. We just need to talk and not make sure that you understand the tool. And they said, but I think we figured out, let me show you. And then they started sharing the screen. They built this gigantic graph that is basically a implementation of an SAP, SAP module or whatever SAP thing that they built. I'm not an expert in SAP, but whatever they built, it's called a calculation view or something. And they built that in a matter of hours to see how it performs on Snowflake. On SAP, it takes like a long time because of whatever the SAP architecture is and how it works. But when they moved that to Snowflake and they built using Coalesce, they got the performance boost. But what I was surprised was how quickly they picked up the tool based on a recording.
Yeah, it's definitely very cool. And so in terms of your own experience of building Coalesce and iterating on the technical aspects, working with your design partners to figure out the product direction and grow the business. I'm curious, what are some of the most interesting or unexpected or challenging lessons that you've learned in the process?
First of all, there's a lot of learning. As soon as I started, I was constantly looking at a lot of other tools and what they're doing and what are the gaps that they're trying to fill, starting with, schedulers, orchestrating tools, data observability tools and whatnot. So there's a lot of learning in that regard. It was enjoyable for me. I enjoyed that part. I wouldn't call that as a challenge. But I think one of the challenging aspects for us right now that I see is, we show the tool to people and they get very excited, but they always have something to add to it in terms of what they need. And it's almost like, hey, I love your tool. I want to use it, but can you add this functionality? Can you make sure that you have this by this time? Or when are you planning to have it? And we get that from all directions. So to manage all of that and to prioritize, which is an obvious thing and this is a common problem for any vendor, I guess, that is very challenging, in my opinion, to be able to focus on what we're doing, but also prioritize and pivot if necessary and address those in a timely manner is definitely challenging. And I knew that, but I'm experiencing it now. So that's different, just from knowing and then actually experiencing it.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of the sort of management of these graphs and the execution plans that you have, I'm wondering if you can talk to the, change management process there and how you're able to maybe automate construction of some of these graphs, or being able to say, I've built this graph, I'm going to test it in either a test account for Snowflake or, on a test subset of the data, and then being able to manage that rollout to the full production environment.
Absolutely. And change management is very, very important thing that we have kind of made sure we focus on that right from the beginning. So, first of all, we integrate with Git. We save the state of what was built in what was deployed in our metadata and in Git. So whatever you build, it goes to Git. From there, it goes to different environments that you want to deploy to. So we have this concept of, creating an environment that has credentials, that has the Snowflake account details. It also has something called storage mapping. So it's basically saying, hey, what database schemas that I need to work with when you push this code to this particular environment. So an environment kind of encapsulates all of those things. So when we take this Git state and we push that to that environment, you can do this with command line or you can do this via front end, but it goes through a certain process where it compares what's on the target and it will show you the differences in the delta that it's going to execute. This is what we call plan and deploy, where you always have a plan that you can see before you actually deploy. So you get to approve that. So that's how the change management is done. That's how you promote from one environment to the other. It's going from dev to Git to any number of environments that you want to push to.
Modern data teams are dealing with a lot of complexity in their data pipelines and analytical code. Monitoring data quality, tracing incidents, and testing changes can be daunting and often takes hours to days or even weeks. By the time errors have made their way into production, it's often too late and the damage is done. Datafold built automated regression testing to help data and analytics engineers deal with data quality in their pull requests. Datafold shows how a change in SQL code affects your data, both on a statistical level and down to individual rows and values before it gets merged to production. No more shipping and praying. You can now know exactly what will change in your database. Datafold integrates with all major data warehouses, as well as frameworks such as Airflow and dbt, and seamlessly plugs into CI workflows. Visit dataengineeringpodcast.com/Datafold today to book a demo with Datafold. For people who are looking to accelerate their rate of development and the speed at which they're able to go from idea to analysis, what are the cases where Coalesce is the wrong choice?
It depends on the use case, for sure. And Coalesce is built definitely more for the preparing data for analytics, let's say that. And there are certain proven methodologies that people adopt. For example, Kimball or data vault or things like that, that if you're building something central that's core, you probably follow one of these methodologies to build that. Now, people also build something in between. As I said, they can just build flat tables. That's fine too. But where it doesn't fit is if you're just moving data from one point A to point B for application to application integration, for example, that would not be Coalesce, I would say. I mean, you can bend the tool to do that, but that's not the purpose of the tool. It's definitely in the data analytics domain. So, if you want to do application to application integration, that would be something else that you should look at.
As you continue to iterate on the product and keeping in mind these competing priorities and feature requests, I'm wondering if you can speak to some of the things you have planned for the near to medium term.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this space is vast. There's a lot of need out there for clients. One of the things that we are focusing is, you go into Coalesce and start building the pipelines. Build these nodes and you just build the pipeline right from the beginning. But we want to add some kind of modeling to this down the road, a way to kind of look at the source data and see if you can, kind of connect the dots and say, hey, this field in here is related to this field in this table, and the tables could be coming from different sources. But with that kind of information and input from the user, now we can take the automation to the next level because, you don't even have to specify the joins anymore because we already did from the interface by looking at the data at the beginning. Therefore, we can automate those things. We call it the discovery of data sets. So that's another piece that we're very focused on. But also, Snowflake is adding so much functionality as we speak. I mean, we want to be in lockstep with that. Whether it's a data science use case, like, for example, the Snow Park, I think that's what it's called. We want to make sure what we can do there. That's definitely on our minds as well, to support those data science use cases and other languages that you can generate code for on Snowflake.
Are there any other aspects of the work that you're doing at Coalesce or the overall problems of how to approach data architectural patterns and stay sort of ahead of the game in terms of being able to build out analysis and drive the business that we didn't discuss yet that you'd like to cover before we close out the show?
One thing I am, passionate about, and this is something that I got introduced to recently, is the decentralization paradigm, which is, in other words, they call it data mesh. I really very passionate about that idea because it just seems, going back in all my years of experience with this, if I look at this particular paradigm, it makes a lot of sense. Just to give you a very high-level overview of what that means, basically there's underlying 4 principles. One is make the domain responsible for building the pipelines and producing high-quality data. So in other words, rather than having a central team that does build these big, gigantic data warehouse and has a team of data engineers building these large pipelines, instead of doing that, how about we kind of decentralize this, like take that same idea, but do it at a domain level, do it at a line of business level. That's the first principle. But obviously, once you say that, now aren't you creating silos is the next question, right? If you do that, now you're creating silos. But then the answer to that is, they have to create in a way that it is a product-based mentality. It's like a data as a product. That's what you call. When you go to a supermarket, you buy a product, you expect certain quality, you expect certain documentation, you expect it to be safe. That's the same idea. So if my domain, produces some data and publishes some data, the other domains, other people who want to consume that data expect certain quality. That's the second principle. And the third principle is the self-serving aspect to it. Like people don't have to rely on IT or some kind of specialist that they need to talk to use this data set. Instead, they can just kind of do self-service. And finally, some kind of governance on all of this. Governance at the local level, that is at the domain level, at the same time governance at the broader level, especially from IT, to make sure that there's no duplication and things are being shared correctly and things have some consistency, some standards. So all of this whole data mesh paradigm, I'm very excited about. And the good news that we have from Coalesce side is, I think Coalesce just right out of the box, it checks all these boxes pretty much right away. And I'm very, very curious to see, if an organization is going in that direction, I want to see Coalesce play an important role in their organization.
Yeah, data mesh is definitely an interesting approach that has been gaining a lot of attention. So definitely appreciate your enthusiasm for it. Spoken to Zhamak a couple of times, and it's definitely a subject that comes up repeatedly on this show.
Cool. I'm glad it is, because in my opinion, I think that is the right way to scale for an organization moving forward. However, there's a lot more in there to learn and make sure you do it right.
Absolutely. Well, for anybody who wants to get in touch with you and follow along with the work that you're doing, I'll have you add your preferred contact information to the show notes. And as a final question, I'd like to get your perspective on what you see as being the biggest gap in the tooling or technology that's available for data management today.
I talked about the modeling piece that, a lot of people are asking about it, because, it's one thing to understand the raw data and how that data is linked, especially coming from different sources. On the other hand, once you build something, you also want to see what you built. For example, if you built a data vault, you want to be able to visualize that and see as you're building it, hey, is this what I want? You cannot comprehend everything just by looking at code or even a pipeline. There is another perspective to this, which is the final kind of model view that people will see and kind of can use that as a communication tool for them to understand, and we're also communicating with other business users. We think that is very, very critical and important. And I know we have it on a roadmap. It's going to be coming very soon. That's one thing I can say. I mean, there's a whole lot of other things as well, but I would just say one, since that is the near term.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for taking the time today to join me and share the work that you're doing at Coalesce. It's definitely a very interesting product and tackling a real problem that people are experiencing. So I appreciate all of the time and energy that you and your team are putting into that. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Listening. Don't forget to check out our other show, podcast.init, at pythonpodcast.com to learn about the Python language, its community, and the innovative ways it is being used. And visit the site at dataengineeringpodcast.com to subscribe to the show, sign up for the mailing list, and read the show notes. If you've learned something or tried out a project from the show, then tell us about it. Email hosts at dataengineeringpodcast.com with your story. And to help other people find the show, please leave a review on iTunes and tell your friends and coworkers.
La 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 la.